everybody. My name is Rich, and this is Rich Talks Records, episode number 70. And today, we're going back to Iggy Pop. We're going to be talking about the little loved and weirdly, in the last few years, storm in a teacup level controversial, but mostly nearly forgotten 1996 album, 1996's Naughty Little Doggie. And I think we're probably going to spend about as much time talking about this record as was spent making it. So I have a lot to say. This is a weirdly pivotal record, and we'll see how much I address the controversy, if at all. Perhaps I might just say, you're on your own, think whatever you want. Or I might spend endless hours discussing that one. So we're just going to find that one out together. Naughty Little Doggie was released, it says here, on March 5th, 1996, recorded in the summer of 1995. So I first got the dates from this. Paul Trinka's, yes, we're opening it up yet again. And those of you eagle-eyed enough to know will see that, yes, this Kleenex is in fact serving as the bookmark for where Naughty Little Doggie is very briefly discussed. But it was recorded. We actually have hard dates for once for an Iggy album. It's kind of nice to have. June 20th to July 1st at Track Record Inc. in Hollywood, California. Now, Naughty Little Doggie is not terribly well loved and not terribly remembered even, particularly. But Naughty Little Doggie, strangely, is a pivotal album and is in fact the making of two albums. So we're going to be talking about the album that was made and the album that was could have been but was unmade or abandoned or modified into this. This was the first album that Iggy album that I bought when it came out. I don't know if I bought it. So I was, how old would I have been? I would have been 18 when this album came out. And a couple months into my freshman year of college. And my Iggy fandom had grown by leaps and bounds in a very, very brief period of time. In December of 1995 is when I got my first album of his, or anything related to him, which was Funhouse. And I was immediately knocked out by it. It was one of those albums, sometimes the great masterpieces, it takes a little bit of work to understand it. I've often found that sometimes with some of the great masterpieces, you're kind of weirdly indifferent to them at first, and you can't really work out what the big deal is. And then every once in a while, something just knocks you out beyond comprehension immediately, and that's what Funhouse was for me. And, I already was well aware of who Iggy was and what his importance was. I had known the singles from Brick by Brick, and I remember reading a big 2-page article about him in the Chicago Sun-Times. And there was a photo of him. I should try and find that article, because it would be interesting to read it now, where he was like looking into the camera and playing a Telecaster, playing it left-handed. And I remember thinking, I thought he was cool, but he was just one of those people. It just didn't occur to me even to buy records by him. He was almost somebody like a Tom Waits, or even at that point, Neil Young. I didn't start buying Neil Young records until early 95. So Iggy was just one of those older people that I thought was nominally cool, but whose music other than literally who says it in the Year Punk Broke documentary, Funhouse is my favorite LP. Is it Dave Markey? I forget who says it. Somebody says it. Maybe it's Mark Arm. I don't remember. So that was always sort of the starting point. And then I saw Henry Rollins do a speaking show in the fall of 95, and he talked about listening to the Raw Power master tapes. So and that they were gonna get it remixed and get it back out into the world, and that there were all these unused guitar tracks that Bowie had mixed down. And so that was like the Stooges then just sort of became the obvious starting point. The other thing that really pushed me into Iggydom is I was aware of who he was during the American Caesar period. And at some point in the American Caesar period is when he did his interview for not the Time Life History of Rock and Roll, but the PBS History of Rock and Roll, which, yes, is out there in bits and pieces on YouTube. And that was what really, really knocked me out. Iggy talking about the formation of the Stooges, Iggy talking about the musical influences, some of the raps of his that are now like burned into my brain of going to the Ford plant, taking the tour and seeing the bodies get made. And these are big sounds, impressive sounds. These are sounds that even we can master. Things like that. Like it was the beginning of my nearly every single thing this guy says is fucking fascinating. I've talked about that in my other Iggy videos. And my God, I was just so impressed with him. And I just thought this guy is absolutely amazing. So in early 1996, I ventured into getting... So I bought a copy of Raw Power in New York at a record store in New York, and I thought it was really amazing, but I'll be honest, I did not... My later appreciation and defense of the Bowie mix came a lot later. It wasn't until after the Iggy mix that I was able to appreciate the Bowie mix, if that makes any sense, and hear a better remaster of it. But you could tell that the songs were absolutely incredible. And I, somewhere in there, also got the first Stooges album. But in maybe January, maybe February of 96, I got my first Iggy solo album, which was Lust for Life. This is the copy that I bought. Same record store, Secondhand Tunes, where I got my John Lennon bootlegs, and which I've rhapsodized about many, many times before. This is how it came. No sleeve, no dust jacket. This was just what I got. And I loved the cover. I loved everything about it. But this was the beginning. I didn't know about the Berlin trilogy until I saw the PBS History of Rock and Roll documentary. So the idea that this was like an outgrowth of that, and this was part of Iggy's artistic expansion, and he talked about the writing of the song "The Passenger" and the influences of Kraftwerk and Neu, but then also the ongoing influence of Jim Morrison. I was like, oh my God, I love this guy even more. So I thought this album, and still think this album, is like one of the best goddamn albums ever made. I mean, I don't know how many times I listened to this. I listened to it maybe not as much as the Stooges, but nearly. This is just unbelievable. I got in just under the wire of a little movie by the name of Train Spotting coming out. And that's going to be looming very, very largely. So it was just a hop, skip, and a jump before this album came out. And I was like, oh my God, there's a new Iggy Pop album. You better believe I'm going to go and buy that right away, you know? Iggy Pop, as he is presented in early 1996, is similar to that of Mick Jagger during the Rock and Roll Circus in performance, in that he had altered his appearance for a film, and just decided to keep his appearance that way. And there very much felt like a clear, direct break. What was interesting was this clear, direct break was the zeitgeist for me at the time. I felt that there had been, at the end of 1995 for me was the end of the 90s. Not just because I had gotten out of high school and had started college, and not just because I was now dating the second girlfriend and learning about all these different films and different artists and different writers. I mean, like, I've talked about that before, that was like my art college. And to me, there just needed to be a complete... What was the 90s up to that point had completely... It was a car that had totally run out of gas and was down to the rims, and something else needed to completely take its place. I personally looked to the counterculture of the end of the 60s and the beginning of the 70s, and thought, right, what's the obvious point of comparison here? The obvious point of comparison would be the ascendance of the Bowies and T-Rexes and Lou Reeds of the world. Seeing that history of rock and roll documentary, and even like when Richard Hell was talking about like the failing of the counterculture and how people were so hungry for reality, that all of that just made a lot of sense to me. And I thought, like, let's go headlong into something else. So at this time, I actually had dyed my hair. My hair was I had multiple dye jobs at one point, but I was a redhead for a while. Then it was a different shade of red and partially dyed brown, and then the blonde was coming in. The dishwater blonde was coming in underneath that. I started buying clothes and hacking them up with a razor and sort of making my own ensembles. And that's something I never would have done in whatever you want to call the alt rock or the grunge era. You know, that I just wouldn't have done something that was that, I guess, ostentatious. And so, to me, like I said, it was there was a complete jump. And so Iggy coming out in 1996, so he was in The Crow 2 and had blonde hair. It was bleached blonde and with bangs. So it was almost like a version or like a riff on the Uma Thurman cut from Pulp Fiction. And that was the haircut that a lot of girls had at that time. But Iggy, this sort of weird fright wig, bleached blonde. And then doing television performances and photo shoots with these see-through pants. And once, when asked by an interviewer, why are you wearing these see-through pants? Iggy said, I was shopping in New York City and I thought my cock would look really good in these. And the interviewer was not prepared for such directness. But in here, this is the April 1996 issue of Mojo. I've referenced this before. This is the first time I ever got an issue of Mojo. This was my first breakaway from the prisons of Spin magazine and Rolling Stone and the Dribblings in Details magazine. Yes, I actually used to read Details magazine. Very hard to believe, but I did. You would get the occasional really interesting article in there. But I was now not in my highly repressive Catholic high school. I was now let loose in the city with nobody watching me and no truancy officers and nobody calling my parents. And I had a job. So I was pissing money away at the Tower Records. And they had all of these foreign magazines, pre-internet. This was incredibly alluring to me. There was an Australian magazine that I liked a lot as well that I'm forgetting. Maybe it was called Revelations. I forget what it was called, but it was incredible. And so in the same way that sometimes you would see like British clips of British bands or bands on British television, and they would have like the green screen backdrop with like the weird psychedelic lights and stuff. You'd be like, wow, that looks so much cooler than what we have in America. That was the other thing, is the photo shoots, the layouts of the magazines. This was light years beyond what we had in America. Not even close. So these images of Iggy were like really, really, really important for me. And a really, really big deal. Specifically these. Look at this. The red vinyl pants and that ridiculous slab of meat. Like some sort of alternate reality where the Twisted Sister Stay Hungry album had never happened. And this is like the most like wild idea ever for a photo shoot. And then, of course, these images. This, to me, Iggy in silver paint, silver body paint, that was 1996. That was the shift over. That we're done with super earnestness. We're done with trying to fight the fight and be more authentic. We're now going to go in totally the opposite direction, and we are going to evade anybody trying to put us in a jar. We are going to purposely say, so my second girlfriend and I, we were all in on this vibe, okay? We were all in on that. And, you know, Iggy saying, like, I helped wipe out the 60s. Like, that was my vibe. I felt like I was somehow a part of the first half of the 90s. Now we are wiping that out. And my second girlfriend and I did a lot of graffiti, and we wrote, and I'm not going to say what it was. We wrote very, very bad things in public on the walls, and we used very bad words and very bad symbolism as means of provocation, but also as a means of distancing ourselves from what had just come before. And I ran at it, and I was probably deeply confusing to people who I had known even just months or a year before. But that was okay, because I was free, and the freedom meant everything. I was out of the bear trap. I was out of the ideologue indie world bear trap, and I was really enjoying being loud and ridiculous and obnoxious with this girl that I was with. You know, I was really enjoying that. So this interview was hugely, hugely important. It also had a long, and actually here's it, where is it? Damn it, there it is. There's an actual ad for the album, and but we also have a retrospective about Iggy and what is sort of the Kill City era, and how Iggy cleaned up and found his way to Berlin. And this was a fascinating article about the dissolution of the second version of the Stooges. And really, I mean, this was this writing was huge, and Iggy getting himself together. But also, you had these capsule reviews that were really, really, really informative about the man's entire discography. Again, this is pre-internet. I didn't have any frame of reference other than the Rolling Stone Album Guide, and we know about the Rolling Stone Album Guide. The Rolling Stone Album Guide goes up to Lust for Life, and then writes off everything else. The dreaded roadshow disease kicks in, or however the hell they phrased it. So, and I don't even think that like they had Kill City released. So there was some crucial information, like album credits, but then these little blurbs. And it kind of informed my thinking on Iggy, and gave me a sense of what albums to check out, what albums maybe to check out much later. So this article was like massively, these articles, I should say, were massively, massively important for me. The other one that came out around this time, and I went looking for it, people. I referenced it in 2 other videos. The Ray Gun magazine, verbal exploration of Perry Farrell and Iggy. And between these 2 interviews, and that one's pretty loose and pretty wild and pretty eyebrow raising. It was very provocative, and I loved it. I read it and reread it many times, again and again. And Iggy, between these 2 articles, and then all the subsequent stuff, and Iggy did a lot of press, especially in Europe. He was kind of hot stuff in Europe at this point, especially because American Caesar had done very well in Europe. There were a number of topics from this period that basically get brought up again and again in every single article. But this was my first exposure to the press blitz that was going to be this album. All that is to say is that Iggy's image was, I thought, really, really powerful and cool. I thought he looked great. So the emphasis was on a lot of black vinyl clothing, and then the hair. And I thought he looked great. I thought he looked like unbelievably rock and roll. He looked, well, I'll be honest, he looked infinitely cooler than somebody else who was trying to craft an image at this time, and that was Bowie. Iggy's felt effortless and right, and Bowie's just felt like somebody was throwing tons of money at the wall to put a visual together, and to my mind at the time, not really coming up with anything particularly compelling. I also got the feeling that Bowie, that was like for photo shoots or for being on stage, whereas I felt Iggy might actually really dress like that. Now, this was kind of the last time that Iggy specifically crafted a visual image for himself. You think about each of the three Stooges albums all have distinct visual periods. And then the outbreak of his solo career has a distinct visual image. Also, I mean, even not that it was particularly played out in public, but even the Kill City period. And the Zombie Birdhouse period, like Iggy would do that. And certainly blah, 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 you know. And this was kind of the last time that ever happened, because Avenue B is sort of the anti-image. And then after that, you have the beginnings of the birth of, you know, what I just generically call Miami Iggy, which he has basically just looked like for over a quarter century now. So this was really the last time that Iggy had a visual analog to go with a specific period of time. And I thought it was really, really cool. I loved it, and I embraced it. And for me, it made absolute visual sense. Now, I suppose we will backtrack slightly and talk about the album that never got made. The record that could have been. In the Paul Trinka book, it is noted that Iggy, that the sessions for Naughty Little Doggie began with a lot of experimentation, and the phrase that the term he uses, he likes to use, is meat and potatoes. It became a meat and potatoes rock album, and Iggy makes it sound as if, in the article with Perry, which I couldn't find online, unfortunately, so you know, maybe it's out there somewhere, I don't know. Who knows? It might just be down to me someday to digitize it. And who knows? Maybe I'll do that. I wonder if it's on any of those Jane's Addiction forum pages. Maybe it's out there somewhere. Who knows? But that there was a lot of experimentation on the album that he was making. But Iggy's work. So he was in the film Tank Girl. He did an episode of The Adventures of Pete and Pete with what appears to be the members of Luscious Jackson as his backing band. And this informed his creative process. And I quote him, but I think a lot of my best stuff gets written when I'm working on films. I end up in my own little hotel room going arg to calm me down or jazz me up. I get out my guitar and I write. One of the things that is interesting about this album is, and as opposed to the album that he might have made, is at some point Naughty Little Doggie became an overt riposte to American Caesar, which Iggy didn't seem to like on multiple fronts. So he talks about having written a lot of songs in the press for Naughty Little Doggie by the time he gets over to Europe, that he had written a bunch of songs and they were well written and well crafted, and that he threw those songs away. He said that American Caesar was too long and too obscure of a political statement. Also noting the record company meddling. Yeah, the last time they asked for some candy and I gave it to them. I kept the same musicians for this album, and we're going to get to one of the big themes here, but made it more fast food. I wanted it to make me smile and move my butt when I heard it. Iggy also noted in an interview with Much Music from around this time, they're pushing me to make punk records, whoever they are. Paul Trinka posits that they is just straight up the record company and makes it sound as if the producer of this album was sort of chosen by the record company. And Iggy was effectively told, this is who you should be working. One of the things not on this record, and not on either version, and we'll be getting into all this. This is Rich Talks Records. We're fully back, baby. All right? Ride the ride. Just think, out of all the people in the world, this is going to be the definitive statement on Naughty Little Doggie. Another Rich Talks Records first. Nobody else is going to take their time on this one. Anyway, but one of the things that I remember when this was in the press at the time, in 94, 95, was Courtney Love, good old C Love herself, swanning about who she was going to dole Kurt's unreleased material out to. And apparently, Kurt, in his later days, had attempted to reach out to Iggy and get in a studio. Iggy had tried calling him 2 times, and Kurt was not available. Read into that what you will. Iggy implies why Kurt wasn't available. And so nothing happened there, but the idea was that it was somewhere born in there that the unreleased Nirvana song "Talk to Me," a personal favorite. It's a bang up, cracking good time of a song. Love it. Was written for Iggy, and so I remember Courtney, before I had the bootleg, mentioned that song, and that's going to be for Iggy, and I forget who else was going to get a song of Kurt's. And that was how the world was going to hear them. I think this was around the time that she did You Know You're Right. She did that. That was for herself. So Iggy talks about how Courtney sort of went about this and how she changed her tune in the press over time. And it just feels pretty disrespectful to Iggy that she, Courtney was going to bless him with a hit song, and so Iggy is asked about Kurt, and he gives a really interesting, because you think about, there are a number of people who had Kurt Cobain tribute songs, tribute albums, etc., etc. Most of them were not terribly good, I think we can all say. The lone exception would be Neil Young's Sleeps with Angels. I think that's the only one that is worth a damn. The other ones are pretty lame. We all remember them. Or maybe you don't, but there they were. Now there's YouTube videos like songs written about Kurt Cobain, so you can just go look that crap up. But Iggy particularly bridles at the idea that either doing this song in tribute, as a tribute to Kurt, or actually writing a tribute to Kurt. And Kurt just talks about how the corporate music industry vampiring this young kid's corpse, and no, I wasn't going to write a song like, oh, Kurt was with the Angels now, and here's what I would have said to him if I hadn't been on the phone with my accountant. Here's what I would have faxed him, which I think was a particularly pointed jab in the direction of one particular alt-rock band. I think you know who I'm talking about. And he just talks about how gross it is that people wanted to glom onto his youth and suck it all out. So, pointed words, but as with a lot of things with Iggy, pretty reasonable and pretty grounded in common sense. And that is one of the great things that I love about Iggy, a profound grasp of common sense. I touched upon the producer of this album, that they were pushing him to make punk records, and he didn't want to make punk records, but also the sense of this is who you should work with now. Who did the record company decide upon? They decided on the great Tom Wilson. Tom Wilson, who I know him from producing The Dead Kennedys, Plastic Surgery Disasters. An amazing album. An amazing, amazing album. So Tom Wilson did that. But Tom Wilson also did, especially if you watch the last video, he's the producer behind the best work of my beloved favorites, TSOL. Yes, the true sounds of liberty. He also did the Weathered Statues EP, but these, the twin masterpieces, Dance With Me, and Beneath the Shadows. The production on these records is incredible. These are perfectly produced records. So, but by the mid '90s, Tom Wilson had moved on, and Tom Wilson had produced The Offspring. So this was a chance to, get Iggy some hits, which, all of these Iggy videos, as I've stated before, one of the goals of this channel is to eventually have reviewed every single Iggy album ever made, including the Stooges, of course. And one of the common themes, especially as the 90s go along and the 2000s go along, is let's get Iggy some hits. It never really works out that way, or quite exactly the way one would want it. So I think that there probably was a certain amount of compromising hardwired into the making of the album itself. But I strongly don't think that it is in the direction of Tom Wilson. It is not a particularly slick album, and it is not a particularly fussed over album. I think Tom Wilson, and I actually really like the production on this record. You can dismiss it as meat and potatoes, or if you want, but I actually kind of like Party. Weird, like I really like the sound of it. I think it's just a great mid-90s, a great sounding mid-90s rock and roll record. The guitars don't sound particularly dated, or there's not a lot that's like cornball about it. But like Party, it lives and dies on the strength of its songs. Now, there are Iggy's other attempts at, like, Iggy's gonna make a rock album. Iggy's gonna rock again. And Naughty Little Doggie sits in kind of a weird trifecta of albums, not a trilogy, I would like to note, somewhere in between 1988's Instinct and 2001's Beat 'Em Up. Now, Naughty Little Doggie, as a start-to-finish album, you could make the argument is more consistent than either of these. I don't know about that. In fact, the issue with Instinct might be that it's a little too consistent. But on the level of a start to finish, listen, it's miles better than Beat 'Em Up. The problem, though, is that it doesn't have anything that is as much of a deranged, maniacal howl of a standout, of a top-flight song as the opener of this album, Mask. Mask is like one of Iggy's great creations, and nothing on this album touches Mask. And if we're on the issue of standouts, nothing on this album comes anywhere close to the mission statement of Cold Metal, or for that matter, High on You. So it's a frustrating album in that sense, because on one hand, it doesn't hit the lows, and my God, it has some lows, of Beat 'Em Up. But I often don't necessarily think of it in, it's towards the bottom of the middle, I suppose, of Iggy's discography, again, by the man's own lofty standards. Now, I've talked about the album that could have been, and that was always just something that was mentioned sort of in an offhand, in a somewhat offhanded way, if I remember correctly. Remember now, literally going back decades, with the Iggy and Perry interview in Ray Gun magazine, and then the Paul Trinka book, right, which is like a sentence or two. I mean, this period, kind of like Avenue B, I mean, it's over in 3 or 4 pages. He actually spends more time talking about the tour than he does the lead up to the album, or the actual making of the album. October 31st, so Halloween of 2024, somebody posted in an Iggy Pop group, has anybody here heard the Naughty Little Doggie demos? And I knew I was eventually going to be reviewing this record at some point, and my ears perked up. What Naughty Little Doggie demos? What are you talking about? And it was just like a photo of a track list, and people were like, "What is this?" Somebody had found a bootleg of, I think, Brick by Brick demos, and they were like, no, that's a different bootleg. So I went and found it. I did a search. Now, so I'm actually going to be talking about that eventually. I'm going to talk about the album proper, but then I'm going to compare and contrast it against the Naughty Little Doggie demos. And it is 12 songs. I mean, it's an album's worth of material. I think 7 of the songs are unreleased. 5 of them made it onto the album proper. And I think it's going to be interesting to compare and contrast. So I've had these now for a little bit of time, but recently Hans Meertens put out a book, and I believe hopefully it's going to be a volume 1. And this is Iggy Pop, 1977 to 1999, On Track, where he goes through every single song. Towards the back of the book, he covers all the different odds and sods, and these songs are briefly reviewed. Now, Hans and I, this is an excellent book. This is a book that this is the kind of book we should have out there. This is good for the culture. So I am thrilled that this guy created this book, and I would strongly urge, it's put out by Sonic Bond Publishing. I would strongly urge all of you go and check it out. I really like the book. I haven't finished reading all of it, but you know, this is a book that should exist. And if you're an Iggy fan, this is the kind of book that you should support. We need more of this out in the world. Yes. And it's really, really well done. It's really well researched. Love it. And again, this is the treatment that an artist of the caliber of Iggy Pop bloody well deserves. So he and I have a little bit of a philosophical difference here, is he contends that the Naughty Little Doggie demos are for completists only. I strongly disagree, and I think that they give a very strong glimpse, kind of like the Pete Townsend Scoop compilations, give a kind of a semi-heartbreaking glimpse into paths untraveled and what could have been. And I think this would have been the natural extension of his muse, and Naughty Little Doggie perhaps could have served as a really logical, cool, interesting, artistic, creative bridge between American Caesar and then Avenue B. So instead there's this sort of tossed off rock record, meat and potatoes rock record in between, right? And also, I will say, is the best of the unreleased material, honestly, should have been on, I don't know why some of it wasn't included on Bloody Avenue B. It certainly would have thematically fit, and some of the writing is extraordinarily strong. But we're going to get to that much later. But I wanted to put that out there. So I'm not going to put a link to the download. It's out there. Just go to Google, Iggy Pop, Naughty Little Doggie Demos MP3, and you could find it. And I'm going to be strongly urging you later on in this video, probably in like 2.5 hours from now at the rate we're going, to go check it out. So as we ever so slowly inch our way toward album talk, some of the recurring themes in these interviews, once Iggy had made the decision to do away with what I guess we'll call the 1995 songs, or the unmade album, because there's nothing, it was never made. Again and again, he keeps coming back to this idea that the album, that Naughty Little Doggie, was meant to be listened to and taken in, consumed, if you will, like fast food. He constantly references McDonald's. And he also appears to be... So at one point in an interview, he goes, I just wanted this album to be listened to by a guy going, yeah, 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 eating at McDonald's, and that you could listen to the album on your headphones going, yeah, 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 and eat a hamburger at McDonald's and go, and woo! That's the sort of the concept of the album. As he said, quick and fun to listen to. He also appears by this point to already be self-conscious about the album title. And he seems to be making fun of the album title, though he does offer a potential alternate that he should have called it something more butch, like My Big Muscles. I don't know that my... I don't know that my big... I can't even say it with a straight face. I don't know that My Big Muscles would have been necessarily a much weirder album title. But I don't know, it's appreciably better than Naughty Little Doggie. But he does seem somewhat embarrassed by it. But he does keep saying that that the album has a dumb title. The other thing that one could say is dumb, given that Iggy had created such an amazing visual image for himself at this time, is this, I'm just gonna say, abomination of an album cover. This album cover is just god-awful, and I truly, truly dislike it. Iggy has some of my favorite album art of all time, and this is just, this isn't even slumming. This is like Lou Reed mistrial level in terms of just, what the fuck is this? And this is just not... This is just so below his talent level. So he apparently thought the album cover was also kind of dumb looking, and that's why he went with it. This was taken at the 1995 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction concert that Iggy performed at, Lou Reed performed at. I talked about it in my one Bob Dylan video, where Dylan had the gold lame shirt, and yeah, so... And the Pretenders were there. I forget who else was there. But this was apparently taken there. The photo was taken by Anton Corbijn, who did all the amazing Joy Division stuff, and did he do the heart-shaped box video? I know he did a bunch of Nirvana photo sessions. He did then a lot of stuff with U2. It's hard to believe this is an Anton Corbijn photo. But what really kills it is this goddamn font. I mean, look at this. I just don't know that you get more 90s ugly than that. And that was apparently by Phil Bicker. And I can honestly say, shame on you, Phil Bicker. My God, just how hideous is that? Works a little bit better on the back cover, but again, that's pretty generic stuff. Honestly, the inside photos, and this is talking about meat and potatoes, this is a pretty no-frills album packaging. The photos on the back with Iggy with the dye job, looking way better. And then very, again, meat and potatoes, just a text of the lyrics, very brief album liner notes. And then, but what's on the inlay tray, Rich? Show us what's on the inlay. Huh? It's gotta be something cool there. We got, again, this hideous font. So what's on the inlay? Well, it's gotta be good. Oh, there's nothing at all. That's what's there, nothing. So, but yeah, the fast food thing is an ever-present thing that Iggy repeats. He also talks about, and I thought this was interesting, that it's along the lines of that he wanted to structure the album as like a classic rock album. With a lot of with two good ballads. So you'd have the rockers and then two good ballads. Short, funny, sexual longing, and a silly title is how he referred to it. Speaking of sexual longing, of which there is a lot on this album, and boy, we're going to be getting into all of that. if you know about them. Okay. I thought this was an interesting quote. I never felt I needed a big car and the fat wallet to score chicks. Put it that way. Sex is the essence of everything I do, but I'm not sure it's the actual act that's important. And this is the thing. I don't think women care that much about a guy who just comes in and whacks them for an hour till he comes. They look for a certain stance in a man, something they can climb. See, that's why I love Iggy as an interview subject. Things like that just fall out of his mouth. Incredible. The other thing that comes up again and again, and that he just, as the tour goes on and as the press run goes on, you can also just date these by Iggy's hair getting darker and darker as the press run goes along and less blonde, is what the inevitable Stooges reunion, that the Sex Pistols had already reunited. Iggy opened for them. He even kept no fun out of his sets so that they could perform it. He's very, very respectful about the Sex Pistols and the Sex Pistols reunion and the show itself. Iggy is almost deferential to the Pistols and all of them. Glenn Matlock, Steve Jones. Glenn Matlock also said that Iggy was very, very kind backstage. So, he talks a lot about the potentiality of the Stooges and that he doesn't want to just do a reunion tour, that it would be predicated upon making new music. Now, in previous videos, I've talked about the phenomenon of what I call breadcrumbing, that Iggy breadcrumbs, that he plants, he leaves these trails, almost, again, kind of like Pete Townsend, of that his interviews are almost like workshops or laboratories for upcoming ideas, and that you can go back and see what happened years later. And it's a interesting phenomenon that's very specific to Iggy's interviews. So one of the things he talks about at some point is that if the Stooges were going to reunite, it would have to be predicated upon making new music, but that it would have to be an album that no one would like. He called that one. Witness my review of The Weirdness here on this channel. Watch it after this video's over, folks, if you haven't seen it before. It's a goddamn good video. One of my personal favorites, in fact. I thought that was interesting. Also, like the potential 1989, I think, time that Scott had approached Iggy about reuniting the Stooges, it appears that this again was led by Scott, saying, you play with all these other people, why not play with us? Which indeed begs the question, why not? I think it could have worked. So the other thing that's also a piece of interesting breadcrumbing is the phenomenon of Rick Rubin. Apparently Rick Rubin somehow got caught wind of all of this and wanted in. And Iggy then was very interested in the concept of the Stooges finally working with a good producer, which, boy, that's a big fuck you to John Cale, is it not? So, and who's the cat that, Don Gallucci. I mean, I don't know that you're going to get a better producer for the Stooges than Funhouse. But then, of course, he's like, after I thought about it, I'm like, fuck Rick Rubin. We don't need Rick Rubin. But Rick Rubin, again, pre-Weirdness, was in the offing for producing that. So it's interesting that both times Rick Rubin made his way. But Iggy talks a lot about the like that this was just an inevitability, that he has to complete his commitments and then he's going to get in a room with the Ashton brothers and see what's there. We now get into album talk. I just want to say, this is the most anybody's ever going to talk about this album. Just think about that. You're witnessing a historical event. So one of the stated aims of this channel, among a few, obviously reviewing every record Iggy ever made, but one of the big things, and I really try to do this, is to evaluate the art on its own terms. That is really important. I try to go to it and not force it to come to me. Not to sound whatever, but I really wish more people thought that way. I dare say it might be a little bit better of a world, and we might have a healthier arts culture, especially now when when so many people just want everything to just be about them. So while I do talk about the personal relevance to my life, I just wanted to sort of be understood as I go far deeper than anyone's ever going to go on this album. Is this going to be my longest Iggy video on this? Maybe. All right. So, album recorded very quickly. The lineup on this thing is, what had been Iggy and the Trolls had now codified into Iggy and the Fuck Ups. So we have Eric Schermerhorn on guitar, who was kind of Iggy's right-hand man for a long time. Hal Cragen on bass. He also plays keyboards on Shoeshine Girl. And Larry Mullins on the drums. We also have Whitey Kirst, but who becomes important in the touring after the exit of Eric Schermerhorn. Apparently Eric left to go play with... Damn it, I'm forgetting now. It's not They Might Be Giants. Maybe it is. Damn it. He left to go play with somebody of some renown. And Iggy didn't keep people on retainer. And so he left. Iggy apparently wanted to keep him and made a play to keep him. But so Eric isn't around for the touring on this record. But that is where Damien, Pete Marshall, shows up. So he's on the live stuff, and Whitey Kirst, the mighty Whitey, gets promoted essentially to lead guitarist and sort of, again, de facto right-hand man. I will say, I am going to be contrasting my impressions from 1996, because I remember listening to this for the first time very clearly. I remember the night. And with my impressions of it now, partially because Iggy is the same age as I am now when he made this. Yes. I am a 48-year-old speaking to you, and he was a 48-year-old speaking to you. So, 30 years apart. Here we go. So, so I think it's interesting. So, I think Tom Wilson did an amazing job producing this album. I really, really love the sound of this record. None more so than on the powerful fucking album opener, I Wanna Live. And unless I am understanding Iggy, an interview with Iggy from this time period wrong, this song was written on and off over the course of a 5-year period. The guitars are great. Honestly, I wish American Caesar sounded a little more like this. This is just a great, straight ahead, no nonsense, real rock and roll record. It just sounds really, really fucking good. And I Wanna Live is the best riff on here. It's just a great riff. The rhythm section is great. Nothing is at the expense of anything else. Everything is vibrant and dark and upfront, to use a word we used a lot back in the 90s, punchy. It's punchy, goddammit. And Iggy, probably the best lyrics on this record. Iggy, first of all, a prick's a prick at any age. Boy, ain't that the truth. And sometimes they only get pricklier and lamer. But the sort of the middle eight section of the lyrics is, I think this is brilliant. This is outstanding. And this is, by the way, a co-write with the mighty Whitey Kirst. Check out this middle. This is why we love Iggy. The soul is in the eyeball for anyone to see. I very much believe that to be true. I'm better than a Pepsi. I'm cooler than MTV. I'm hotter than California. I'm cheaper than a gram. I'm deeper than the shit I'm in. And I really don't give a damn. I want to live just a little bit longer now. I love that, too, as a sentiment. Like, I want to live just a little bit longer. And that's very much as a 48-year-old, that's very much my sentiment. I want to live just a little bit longer now. You know? Again, as I said before in a previous Iggy video, I'm not on a death trip. There have been times where you better believe I have been. Not anymore. That's a sentiment I can heartily endorse. But it's just a great song. Iggy sounds great. Again, Iggy's rock and roll voice is amazing. The live footage from this time, I will just say, I'll link to the Rock Palast show, because that's like a whole show and it's shot pro. Iggy sounds great. As this is like, he's still doing all his Iggy moves and his dances. Like, he is still like at like top physical shape and able to do all the Iggy stuff, and this is like he's still like super like cut, like 0% body fat, and just like you know, just perfect, just like a perfect fucking rock and roll physical specimen, who's enormously fucking quick on his feet. And the band leader, you can tell from how he instructs the band. He hears every single note. He's just, you know, the destruction or the anarchy is real, but also the crowd engagement and need and desire to connect is real. Love watching him live during this period, and again with the emphasis on the black vinyl and the hair and the eye makeup. Like, Iggy looked really fucking cool in this time. He just looked great and sounded great, and all the Iggy moves are great, and the band is rocking and really plays tight as a band. And you hear that. It is a very live, in-the-room sound. So, you know, I Want to Live is, you know, again, none of these necessarily might be major songs. Like I said, I think Mask, I think High on You, and I think Cold Metal are all much greater songs. But as just like a straight up the middle, again, if this is Iggy's concept of fast food, like, make mine a double. I can't believe I just fucking said that. Jesus Christ, so embarrassing. Anyway, I could call me Fantano for that fucking Anyway, come on. You're here watching this. Come on. Anyway, you know it. You know what fucking time it is. Anyway. So, I Want to Live, great opener. Like, it's fantastic. And then we get into the second song, co-write with Schermerhorn, Pussy Walk, a song Iggy talked a lot about in interviews. He was asked about it, but he also brought it up himself. Iggy, and performed it live a lot. Iggy seemed to think that this was a very major song. I'll tell you that some of the European television audiences really enjoyed it, especially the gals. So Pussy Walk. This album has a very no-nonsense, you know, again, the sort of the post-1989 albums, the post-grunge albums, the no-nonsense approach, straight talking, I'm not going to screw around with you, I'm going to tell it just like it is, and if you can't handle it, that's your problem. This album has some misbegotten sex talk or sex references in a way to its spiritual cousin, an album that was being made concurrently, so it couldn't possibly have been influenced by it, but then influenced Iggy's next album, Avenue B, which I talked about in my Avenue B video, which you should also watch, because it's fucking fantastic. But that is, oh boy, Sex with Your Parents Part 2, or was it called Motherfucker, Sex with Your Parents Part 2, recorded live on the 4th of July of 1995, from Lou Reed's Set the Twilight Railing. Equally kind of like, sure, but it just sounds kind of preposterous. Also, Iggy had kind of covered Pussyville with the much better Crampsian, dark, grooving, menacing swing of Pussy Power on Brick by Brick. And this Pussy Walk is no Pussy Power. And it really does just sort of feel like I don't really know why Iggy had such affection for this song. Especially because when we get to the unreleased material, there is an infinitely better song that is very thematically similar, and I will be talking about that. Ooh, it's my own version of breadcrumbing. So, Pussy Walk, the arrangement is cool. It's a good riff, a good kind of swinging, jivey an Edwin word, if you will, riff, and it you know. Look, I'm no prude, so I don't necessarily have a problem with the song, but I always just thought it was a little ridiculous and silly, and not silly in like a fun throwaway kind of way, but silly in a, like, really, that's what you've... So, in particular, what really bugs me is the chorus. Can your pussy walk? Can your pussy talk? Can your pussy smile? Can your pussy frown? Can your pussy... This is where it really goes down. Can your pussy prance? Can your pussy dance? Yes. Can your pussy walk? Can your pussy talk? I can't help but when I hear the song to answer those questions. Kind of. Jesus Christ, I certainly hope not. Depends on the angle. Also depends on the angle. Maybe in the most abstract sense. Most likely not. Would be the answers to those questions. Or, you know, what I would be looking for. If I were to ask those questions of a young woman. But speaking of young women, that was not a planned segue. I'm just that fucking, like, you know, all the vibes, you know, are just surrounding me, man. So, as we'll get to later, been a lot of hand-wringing and phony moral outrage. Every librarian has their theory. You know, and you don't need, I think I've made this point before, you don't need a PMRC when everybody just gets to pretend that they are their very own, channel their very own inner Tipper Gore. And there's a lot of phony, you know, you look at some of the comment sections sometimes on different groups on Facebook, and, you know, people pretend to get really up in arms and really, really upset about one of the songs on this record. We'll be getting to that. But, you know, if they really, really were, you know, and that song has, you know, there's, we'll get to that. But I'm not really sure what the deal is, because this here is only the second song on the album. You don't even have to listen to the whole thing to get to the end. It's a short record. It's only 40 minutes. But when Iggy talks about, you know, going to the high schools and junior high schools, where's the hand wringing there? If you're gonna lose your shit and clutch your pearls and, you know, your monocle's gonna break, you know, he's making jokes about it. Just saying, you know, like, why is this song available coast to coast? I mean, I think all these songs should be available. Also, one of the things I found interesting from this, you can see, I think you can see where this video is heading, by the way. There is, and we ain't gonna see it now, that's for goddamn sure. There's an unreleased Pussy Walk video. Can you imagine? That apparently Iggy had no involvement in. Some French film director made it because he loved the song so much and gave it to Iggy as a gift. So, yeah, think about that. There's somewhere in the vaults, somewhere in the Iggy vaults, is the unreleased Pussy Walk video. Can you imagine? So the other thing that I kind of want to say about the fast food nature of this record is I sort of feel like, and again, Iggy's phenomenon of breadcrumbing, I feel like this was Iggy looking at the current radio landscape. We are now post-Nirvana. We are now deep into scrunge. And I honestly think that this was Iggy, kind of along the lines of an instinct, assessing the media landscape around him and thinking, well, I can come up with something to fit into that world. And I feel like, and we'll get to this in a minute with the song Knucklehead, because I feel like Knucklehead is actually sort of like the thesis statement, but I'm throwing it in here because why not? But I feel like there is this sort of thing with Iggy of, well, I'm going to appeal to the sort of meathead modern rock audience, and him sort of thinking, well, why not me? And as Bowie was going from high concept to high concept, I also do wonder if that was also a part of Iggy's, like, well, I'm just going to go straight at what is, you know, what we used to call back in the olden days, scrunge. But also, you know, a year after this, he talks about wanting to, did he specifically say Stone Temple Pilots? I forget. Or did he refer to them as the band with the heroin singer? But I always felt that was part of what informed the Raw Power remix. that I want something that could be played like on alt rock radio, like on Q101 or K Rock or something. But I also feel like that leads. I feel like what you have on this album ultimately leads to what amounts to some of the rather humiliating jock jams on Beat 'em Up. So this album, again, sits in sort of a weird part of the Iggy chronology. The other thing is, and I've also talked about this before, one of the other running themes with the Iggy videos is the idea that if, ideally, when I am finished with all of these in years from now, probably, that you theoretically could be able to watch all of them. It'll probably take like 80 hours, huh? But you could theoretically watch all of them, and that will be the definitive oral, AURAL, book of Iggy Pop that I'm actually doing, and I'm just doing it, the chapters all way the hell out of order, right? But I think the greater story is how this guy from Ypsilanti has managed to maintain being a media figure, a consistent media figure since the 60s, and without ever having any major hits. It is really remarkable. I don't really understand how the hell he's done it. And part of it is making these sort of strange moves. It's kind of brilliant. In his own way, he's made as many idiosyncratic moves to simply maintain as Dylan has. You know, so I do find it fascinating. I find Iggy's ability to exist in the media absolutely fascinating. And I suppose, well, that'll reach. We'll get to that with the last song too. God, I really don't. Can you tell I don't want to talk about that fucking shit? Anyway, we get to the third song on the record, and what I consider to be the peak. Of this album, and one of my favorite Iggy songs ever. And a song that knocked me out when I heard it. So I listened to this. I think I had the album, I want to say I had it in my school book bag for like a week or two before I had a chance to listen to it. And I had been up with the second girlfriend, and she had gone home at like 2 or 3 in the morning, and I was still wide awake. And I just remember listening to this in my bedroom, super late at night with headphones on, and just sitting there in the dark, lights out. And I don't know why that experience has stayed with me, but it has. And the first song, I Want to Live, I was like, oh, this album's going to be fucking great. This is fantastic. Like, yeah, fast food, like right on. Because I'd read some of the interviews, like, this is going to be amazing. And then there was Pussy Walk. But then there was this, Innocent World. Innocent World is something of a minor gem. It's something of a minor masterpiece in the Iggy canon. In interviews from around this time, Iggy said, and I absolutely love this, this is a direct quote, "When I look back on my youth, I think I was really very corrupt, but I felt innocent. Now, I may be more moral, but I'm more aware of the corruptions." Also, breadcrumbing towards the song Corruption, which is a cousin to the single on this album. All these intertwining, simple lines intertwining. So, Innocent World, first of all, great riff, fantastic riff, band sounds great, Iggy sounds great. But what's so you have the intro. The other thing I should say is I think it's Schermerhorn doing the solos. Fantastic. Maybe Whitey does the solo on I Want to Live. But the solos are specifically excellent on this record, and the taste level of Schermerhorn and or Kirst is fantastic. Like they're snaky, sexy, rock and roll, but also highly musical, really well thought out. The tones are great. Like, this is a really underrated, really good just guitar album. And the taste level is just fantastic. So anyway, I meant to say that about I Want to Live. Like, great soloing. So But Innocent World has a almost Beatles-esque ability to just get right down to business, like, or 63, 64 Beatles. Like, there's the setup of the song, there's the intro, and then it's just off and running. And the concision of the arrangement is, I find that sort of thing very impressive. It's one of the best realizations of what Iggy's aesthetics for this album were. Now, the lyrics. I used to live in an innocent world. I had a car and a pretty blonde girlfriend. We was too young to know what we were doing, and anyway, I was just fooling around. I didn't have a car. She had the car, but I had a pretty blonde girlfriend. And, I also felt innocent. Now, as a 48-year-old, I can look back and I can see, corruption might be a little bit of a strong word, but I was perfectly okay with corruption in a certain way. But I had an overwhelming insouciance fighting my inherited innocence. And I very much relate to the sentiments of this song because I had a pretty blonde girlfriend, and I was in an innocent world. I really and truly was. And I can think of any number of instances in which it was an innocent world. But the line, I was just fooling around, which was very much my teenage years. Like, I really just ran on instinct. I was so intellectually and specifically analytically amorphous. I really did just run on instinct. I couldn't even tell you what my feelings were about really anything. And the thing of I was just fooling around, I was just sort of putting one foot in front of the other. I think that that's very, very true. Living on instinct. I think it's a brilliant, brilliant lyric. Contrasted with the second verse, and this stuck out to me back then. During what I have called the divorce period, I thought about this song probably hundreds of times. The second verse. Now I slink around like a killer. The things they say are just just a bunch. I think he sings just a bunch of filler in my mind. And then he repeats in my mind. And that was, I'm largely out of that phase now, but boy, that's a really, really significant lyric. It also is kind of the beginning of the phenomenon that I talked about in, I forget which video it was. Was it the Avenue B video? Or maybe, I think it was the Ready to Die video, of this phenomenon of Iggy, like, sort of putting himself in the mindset of somebody who's on the run, wanted, or already apprehended, somebody in prison, or somebody facing prison, or somebody facing some sort of punishment or confinement, whether physical or spiritual or psychological. And so, now I slink around like a killer. The things they say are just a bunch of filler in my mind. That's one of the best lyrics he ever penned. That's brilliant. Surrounding that, though, is you do have some frustratingly indifferent rhymes, which is, as evidenced by the chorus of Pussy Walk, something of a mounting problem as the album goes along. And then we get to Knucklehead, which take the Meathead stuff I was talking about and apply it to this. So Knucklehead, there's a lot to like about it. And that's the other thing. The solo on Innocent World is gorgeous and just sort of keeps, there's a brief moment where it just sort of keeps going and just explores itself for a few extra seconds, and it's one of my favorite moments. Again, the taste, before it comes back into the chorus, the taste level on this album, when it works, it works. And then there's Knucklehead. And Knucklehead, I like the riff, but it gets, for me, a little generic. Some of the lyrics are pretty funny. Fancy Apple laptop costs $5,000. Fresh girl in a t-shirt still looks best. Very, very, very true. Very, very, very true. I will never forget as long as I live. I shouldn't say this in a video, but you know, I remember once I was at a concert and this is literally 25 years ago, and there was a girl at the show and she was in just like blue jeans and a white V-neck T-shirt, like a Hanes T-shirt that she had like gotten from like a boyfriend or a one night stand or something, and just like classic like blonde hair, blue eyed, and just like really, really pretty. And she clearly wasn't wearing a bra. And I just remember seeing this girl, and you know, I was like, wow, you know, there you have it. It doesn't really get much better than that. She had no makeup on, and she's just like in the crowd. I saw her for like 2 seconds, and I can still remember that. I was like, God damn, yeah, that's a wondrous thing, is it not? You know, it's just appreciating the beauty of nature. So this song, what kills me about this song is the chorus. I think the chorus just really, really, really lets it down. The societal critique, super agree. Iggy trying to fit into this here modern corporate world, and struggling with it and feeling sick about it and sick about kind of himself dealing with it. Cool. But the I is, I'm not your stepping stone. And I can never get around that. I'm not saying it's a lift, but it just makes me think of Stepping Stone. And I'll be quite honest, I like that song a hell of a lot better. The other thing is, the third verse really goes to hell. And I kind of can't stand the third verse. And on an album that is boiling things down to component parts and is like fast food, they should have just dumped the third verse. Because I feel like that just sort of brings the whole song down. Along with the fact that the chorus doesn't live up to the first verses and doesn't live up to the riff. So Knucklehead is, while not a bad song, a thoroughly kind of mid-level song that, you know, it sounds fine, and if you're driving in the car or something, it's not bad by any means, but yeah, certainly not a tremendous work of art. And then we get to what I guess is, and Knucklehead is a Innocent World, and Knucklehead and the next song are all solo writing credits. Now we get to the final song, side one, To Belong. And To Belong is one of the songs from the original demos. And, you know, Iggy wrote a scrunge song, you know, and why not? Again, why not him? Why not Iggy? Hold on. Yeah, there we go. Oh, she hasn't been here since, I think, the Beatles video. Yeah, hi, honey. So, I really like To Belong. It has, like Corruption, its sort of spiritual twin, and the Corruption could be sort of the sequel to Belong. I think that it has sort of a generic video, like an extremely generic 90s video that could just be a video by anybody. Isn't that right? Yeah. But the song is very much kind of like a scrunge modern rock radio song, like quiet, loud dynamics and big explosive, mostly just 2-word chorus. But the song is, I think, interesting because it's a little bit more lyrically ambitious, which doesn't surprise me because it comes from that first batch of songs. We'll get to that. And it's sort of, I like it as an allegory, but I also think that it does make sense with Knucklehead being on the record that this is the real core of what he's talking about on Knucklehead, and that this is getting more down to the real emotional, accuracy of it. And, I'm giving up my soul to belong here. And I think that is about Iggy as himself, as a media figure, and and trying to survive in the 90s, thus making this an unusually sophisticated meta statement of a scrunge song that is something that none of those other bozos were ever going to be able to write, even with detailed instructions. So, also, Iggy's voice is fantastic on this. He sings the hell out of it. He sounds great. Excuse me. Like Corruption, the rock and roll voice is there. And this, it's COD Pixies, COD Nirvana, but why not? Why not Iggy? And this song should have done well. Why the hell not? It's better than, it's better than any number of other alt-rock staples of its time. And honestly, as a competitive single with Lou Reed's Hooky Wookie, for instance, it leaves that, it beats the hell out of that as a single. It's a very, very strong song and a very strong side closer. It's interesting that the Loud Quiet, Iggy considered sort of the side-ending ballad, because it's not necessarily a ballad per se. So anyway, I really like To Belong. I think it's a very, very underrated song, and I think it should be held up more. While I wouldn't necessarily, and it just, again, as a statement, as a 48-year-old's statement of purpose, you can do a whole hell of a lot worse. And honestly, it begs for better company. And yes, it's thematically tied to Knucklehead, but it is much better than Knucklehead. And it makes me wish that, again, maybe a little bit more forethought, that the album was just a little less fast food, or maybe a little bit more Five Guys and a little bit less McDonald's. Perhaps that's the way to put it. But now, there we have it, and now we shall flip the record over. All right, so we get into side two. Co-write with Schermerhorn, and we get into Keep On Believin'. Sort of a more of a kind of a quasi, I guess, earlier rock and roll styling. I really, truly dislike this song. The lyrics, to call them half-assed doesn't even begin to cover it. The utterly indifferent rhymes are, again, this is just sort of speed writing, and the band doesn't, unfortunately, do enough to sort of cover that or make it interesting on its own. The groove is, I actually find it kind of awkward. It almost sounds like slightly backwards or like off kilter, but again, not like in an interesting way, not like in some sort of like Captain Beefheart way. And there's there's good-looking girls in New York City. I mean, it amounts to basically nothing. And then you have the chorus. There was some on the last Le Tigre record that I ever bought. Actually, I really don't remember, but there was a song on there called Keep On Livin'. And I just remember thinking, like, wow, these girls are bone dry. They got nothing to say. Like, I just remember finding that song a total abomination. This isn't maybe as bad, but it's nearly as empty. I mean, this is just... and again, when we get into the demos or the Unmade album, there are better songs that could have taken the place of this. I just don't get it. It's really, really, really weak. Especially if you're thinking of this in terms of some sort of vinyl sequencing as a side opener. So, yeah, I've never liked Keep On Believing. I've had to listen to it. So I have wound up listening to this album an ungodly number of times in the past 2 weeks. This is the most I've ever listened to that song. I've skipped it like since 1996. I remember listening to it for the first time and like, this isn't very good. And I never liked it after that. So then we get to the next song, solo writing. Oh, Whitey is on guitar on this one. Excuse me. Now And this is Out of My Head, which is part of the original demos, which has a really kind of beautiful wandering 60s psychedelic vibe. And I really, really like it. The guitars on this are great. The jangle and expanse and the beauty of the guitars, fantastic. And the groove that the rhythm section keeps, also fantastic and highly complimentary of what the guitars are doing. The lyrics, though, and then the little sort of Soundgarden-esque, Kim Thayil-esque riffage in there, and the way that it just very elegantly glides into that, really beautiful. Very, very lovely guitar parts and arrangements. And but then we've got some weird goddamn lyrics. So the first is about Sally, and Sally being apparently put into prostitution. But then and then there's sort of a lead up to the chorus, and then the chorus itself. But then the particularly, I mean, so as if that's not brutal enough. The second verse, Jimmy goes round the dumpsters every day, trying to find a way out, some kind of way. He knows he's a target. Everyone is. Strangle that rock and roll star. Make him eat jizz. It's a sad, bad feeling. That's a pretty wild verse. And brutal. But also, again, it points to the concept that I think has really been lost over time, that and still existed in '96, that rock and roll as an art form, as a cultural force, was still that of, that of the outlaw, that of the people that didn't fit. And the people who had become successful at it, your Keith Richards or your Lemmys or something, that they had figured out a way, that they had sort of like gamed the system, and had found a way in the world for themselves, and that could serve as some sort of bizarre beacon of hope for dreamers like yours truly. So I think that this goes a long way towards, like, in terms of contextualizing, like, it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. Powerful, brutal, but then offset with the melodic gorgeousness of the music. Iggy did a hell of a job on this. This is a great song. Again, it's maybe a minor great song, if that makes any sense. But I like it quite a lot, and I think it's a kind of a something of a gem tucked away on the second half of this album. Then we get a co-write with Schermerhorn again, and this is Shoeshine Girl, also part of the original demos, and originally called Spellbound. I will read this from this article. The story behind Shoeshine Girl reveals much about Iggy Pop's view of the state of music. So we see this as a recurring theme, and a theme that will truly get pounded into the fucking dust on Skull Ring eventually. It was Lollapalooza Day, and I was on my way to appear in Tank Girl, which was shooting in LA. I started chatting to this goth girl at the airport. I asked if she was off to Lollapalooza, and she said, I ain't going to that. All those groups are pussy. That gave me such a kick because I personally can't stand all of those alternative bands. The scene is totally fucking uniform and a load of hype. There have been individual records, which I thought were very good, but as with everything else, all the plankton jumped on ship and ruined it. Boy, ain't that the truth. But let's take a closer look. So Shoeshine Girl, again, really, really beautiful guitar arrangements. This is the song that has the keyboards on it mimicking a string arrangement, which is very beautiful. And again, kind of this quasi, 1967 psychedelia, but also sort of Houses of the Holy, sort of Jimmy Page Rain song-ish. There's that, that sort of mystical sparkle. And so it's beautiful. Iggy does something interesting with the lyric where he frames it, it's like a classic traditional folk ballad. so where there's the opening and then the restatement at the end, and kind of in a like, my name is John Johanna or something along those lines, except updated for the 90s. And again, Iggy's reflections on this weird modern world that he is forced to endure. But I had never really paid that much really close attention to the lyrics, and as I was listening to the album, I had a realization between, especially the split, and Iggy had talked about this on this album, that you'll have complex emotions or sad emotions or ambiguous emotions offset against excited, happy music, which is a trick. Fun song, rock and roll, fun songs about sad stuff, right? Trick as old as rock and roll itself. And I really paid attention to the lyrics really for the first time ever, all the way through on this song, and especially the juxtaposition against the music. And I was telling my wife, I was like, it's kind of like, if you've ever thought like, wow, and really this is what the song is really about. I mean, yes, there's the music, like, industry critique or whatever angle of it. But on another level, if we're going to get into the sexual longing, if you've ever thought to yourself, like, wow, this chick has amazing tits, and I'm totally like checking out this awesome rack that this girl has, and I find checking out this chick's like amazing rack to be a profound, deep, mystical experience, man, then by golly, Iggy Pop has written the song for you. And I said that to my wife, and she goes, so what then? It's a song written exactly for you? And we both bust out laughing, and I said, ah, yes, touche. Ah, dearest one, you know me all too well. So we had a good laugh over that. And that's really what the song is about. He's checking out this chick's tits. And again, who am I to say no to that as subject matter? But it does feel a little silly in a way, because the music is very serious. And he's, what's the line in here? Like, her skin was not like silk, but she had a way of looking that made me want to milk. As I sat high above her, her cleavage I could see. I contemplated both of them. That's how she spellbound me. Again, I'm no prude, but it does feel it does feel a little silly, but that's okay. That's okay. I still like the song. We get to the very next song. Heart is Saved, a solo credit for Iggy, and after a brief kind of tumultuous ratcheting up of tension intro. Again, that's the rock songs on here are best when they really get down to business and they don't throw a lot of other stuff in. The simplicity that Iggy was looking for actually really worked when he really adhered to it. Heart is Saved has, again, fantastic riff. This is the closest, I suppose, Iggy comes to punk, or maybe pop punk. There is a vocal harmony. I would assume that's maybe just Iggy harmonizing with himself, but there is a second vocal, and I absolutely love this song. This is, I guess, this would be maybe like my third favorite song on the record. I think Innocent World and I Want to Live is objectively the best song on here. But this is maybe, I don't know, an emotional favorite perhaps. But I absolutely love this song. Yes, it's filled with indifferent rhymes. And yes, on one hand, you wish that there was maybe a little bit more to it, but the melody as a song structure and as a melodic structure, it is so buoyant, and the band plays the hell out of it. It is truly infectious. It is an undeniable song. Melodically, it's fantastic. Iggy, there's nothing I don't like about it. Even ridiculously half-written lyrics. And a verse that, okay, I'm now just going to talk about this for a second. A verse that I have now thought about, I've been thinking about for 30 years. Because I can't imagine writing something like this. And I don't mean it in like a, oh, it's so far out. But like, I can truly say I never would think to write this. Personally, I like Midwestern towns. And that's the thing about this record. And again, the line about like, I slink around like a killer. There are these like fascinating little moments on this record that make you wish that it was more fleshed out. It drives me a little crazy because you get these little moments. And this is unfortunately something that then happens throughout. The songs are way more fleshed out on Avenue B, but this is a phenomenon that repeats itself throughout. Beat 'em Up, Skull Ring, and The Weirdness. Again, things are a little bit more fleshed out on, and a little less fragmentary on Ready to Die. But, and again on The Weirdness, I think I've talked about that before. You get these little moments, and you're like, while you're thinking about that or taking that in, it's almost like the rest of the song sort of goes by. Not to take away from this song, because I do love this song, but personally, I like Midwestern towns. I love Midwestern towns. You know? Right on. The Midwest is a wondrous thing, and it's a wondrous part of the country. And there's nothing I love more than flat expanses of land. And I love driving out in the morning when there's nobody on the road. It fuels me. I love it. It's beautiful. But then I like the girls there, sure. And even the clowns, I guess. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, and that's just 2 lines of the song. You know, and that's the thing about this album. You know, that's what's so strange and utterly baffling to me about this album. I don't want to sound, and when you're listening to the song though, I laugh. And I suppose I should try to go to a McDonald's and go and eat like shove a burger in my face, and like maybe I am missing the point, but when you're listening to it, like you smile and appreciate it, but like I've thought about it, like it's one of those things like I'll think about when I'm in line in Walgreens or when I'm pumping gas. This verse inexplicably will pop into my head, and I cannot help but analyze it. Anyway, but I'm making it sound like I don't like the song. I fucking love the song. I don't know how you couldn't like this song, especially if you like rock and roll in any way, shape, or form. It's just a fantastic, melodic, hyper catchy, somewhat kinetic, wonderful song. The band plays it great, and it makes, the redemption of my heart is saved. What a beautiful sentiment. And it's true. And he's bemused by the world around him. He fleetingly is not in conflict with the world around him, though he knows that he doesn't really fit in. But momentarily, he's okay with that, and he's at peace with it. And the thumbnail sketch of the lyric works in that context. And he somehow pulls it off. And it is just a great rock and roll song. I honestly wish the rest of the record, I wish there were 2 or 3 more rock and roll numbers like this that were this punchy. And we could drop, especially Pussy Walking, Keep on Believin', and maybe Knucklehead. I'd be thrilled. I would be thrilled. And I would be championing this album as a misunderstood lost classic then. Absolutely. So Heart is Saved ends things with just, again, melodic buoyancy, joy, and a real sense of redemption and hard-bitten wisdom and hard-fought victory. And that about wraps things up here. And, oh shit, there's one more song. Okay. We come to the 5-minute epic, kind of epic, but it's as epic as this album gets. Look Away. Look Away, a song that Iggy talked about in the interview with Perry, a song that he talked about in the Mojo interview, a song that he appeared to be very proud of. Was not part of the original demo, so it was written later on. And is the particularly brutal counterpoint to to Innocent World. And otherwise, if it weren't for Innocent World, I would say that it is like thematically completely out of place. It is the lone representative, the lone entry on Iggy's big early 2000s double CD compilation retrospective greatest hits extravaganza, A Million in Prizes, the Iggy Pop anthology. It's on disc too. Or it was, because this song has now been pulled from streaming services, and there is, again, a whole lot of pearl clutching. It is, I find it very, very, very strange that some of the people who are supposedly the most forward-thinking are, the horseshoe effect, where they're more regressive and more pro-censorship, and think that the wiping of things is a really good idea. And there's a lot I have to say about this particular subject, and I'm currently debating even how far in I want to go. But I think that pulling your songs, especially songs that are decades old, is really lame. And Iggy's, I didn't like it when Iggy had songs in commercials. There's things along the way that I haven't liked. Again, the Skull Ring era, there were all sorts of utterly bizarre decisions that were made around that time. And some of the business decisions, kind of like with Bob Dylan, again, some of the business decisions I just have super duper not been on board with, right? But then you look at the art decisions, and the art decisions carry the day, right? Especially with Dylan. I think the business of pulling old songs, when other people do it, it makes me think much less of them. And I don't like it. Especially if you're somebody who had a song called Rock and Roll Blank, and you played it all through the 2010s, you played it at your Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction, you had the fucking Stones to sing it in front of Grandmaster Flash's face, you knew what you were doing. You wrote all sorts of intellectual defenses of it, and then you pull it and act like it never happened. I think that's totally, totally ridiculous. You knew what you were doing. And, again, if this song gets pulled, then why not Pussy Walk? Then why not 16? Then why where do you stop then? Where do you draw that particular line? And it starts to get really weird and really dystopian really fast. My understanding is there was a BBC documentary, and they used the name of this song as the name of the documentary. And the song was pulled following a storm in a teacup around that. I think the business of pulling songs, I think less of people when they do it. If I already didn't think much of the person, it makes me think, there was never anything to them anyway. And then you get the particularly absurd examples of some of these current, dumbass nothing pop stars who re-record songs within a week or something, and just Stalinize a song because there's a word that somebody didn't like. It is so utterly preposterous and grotesque to me that somebody would do that, And the thing is, I think sometimes I understand why you might want to pull certain things. But for instance, I think the art has to kind of be worth the heat in some ways. And so, for instance, I think that Guns N' Roses' 1 in a Million is a very, very misunderstood song. Ice Cube and a lot of other people, Vernon Reid, weren't offended by it, I remember Ice Cube was like, no, say what you gotta say. And I think that that's much healthier. I think what gets lost, first of all, I think One in a Million is an incredible song. A I think it's an incredibly powerful song, but it's a song about self-hatred. It's a song about self-loathing, and this person is incoherently shredding themselves while they're lashing out and hurling epithets. But it's really the shame and humiliation, and this sort of self-flagellation. The wounds are inward as much as they're outward, and really the outward is sort of like our fists that aren't landing on anything. And I think that you're watching somebody being self-tortured, and I have always found that really dark and interesting, and to be compelling art, you know. So I think that it has bad words, therefore it must go away. I am, again, super not on board with. I mean, there's all sorts of Ghetto Boys songs. I mean, again, where do you draw the line? NWA songs, like where do you draw the line? It starts getting pretty weird pretty fast, and I think that the more that we as a culture and as a society are afraid of words, you're getting into, you know, that is extremely, extremely unhealthy. And so the subject matter of the song, so the other thing is, I think rock and roll, especially if Iggy's looking back to the 70s, it was for the people ultimately that didn't fit, and ultimately made by the people that didn't fit. And it was people prone to aberrant behavior. Rebellion isn't just this righteous, virtuous thing, that you're purely sticking it to the man. The power of Brando in The Wild One is he says, "What do you got?" And that rebellion and countercultural lifestyles and transgressive lifestyles can go in any number of different directions. Sometimes it is virtuous, sometimes it is not. And Iggy's blunt expression around the matter, he's not excusing it, he's not making light of it, but it's also very, very much in the past tense. Also, with somebody living that much of a subterranean existence, and he really was, is it any wonder that he might have done things and acted out in ways that are, to the larger culture, totally unacceptable? Well, yeah. And, you know, that he was a very severe drug addict. Again, I'm not excusing it, but I think you need to contextualize these things. Like, you know, I've been around many, many drug addicts. There's a lot of aberrant behavior in a lot of different directions. And I think the idea that you're going to, like, I don't know, punish somebody or waggle your finger or be the morality police at that person as they are expressing themselves, then especially decades after the fact, I think that's ridiculous. I think he should have just stood on the song, you know, and the storm would have died down. The song is still out there anyway, and the people who are going to be mortified by it, it's a mortifying song. I mean, all of it's mortifying. The circumstances of Sable are mortifying. The circumstances that her parents, like, that's mortifying. The circumstances of Johnny Thunders is mortifying. Like, all of it's mortifying. There's no good guys in any of it. And Iggy doesn't paint it that way. And he simply says, you know, the song is just a simple, like, he's survived, and the only way that he can deal with it is to look away. That's extremely honest. He got straight. He tries to keep his emotions and his, whatever. He tries to keep the different darker aspects of himself contained because he knows that he has to. And as the larger theme of the record is he's wrestling with society, that he also has to keep a tight grip on himself. And he had been talking about that in the blah, blah, blah interviews. I mean, he talks about literally like having his speaking voice be different and his eyes looking around being different. I mean, I just don't know how much he's not fucking bragging about it. It's the whole thing is a tragedy, and the album ends with this weird, open-ended fucking tragedy out of nowhere. Now, I'll be honest, I'm making the song sound better than it is. I thought it was okay when I first heard it in 1996. I think it's okay now. I never thought it was a major song. I thought it was okay. And I actually found the lyrics to be I actually wanted more from the lyrics. I actually thought the lyrics were, like a bunch of this album, a little too flat and one-dimensional. But I find, again, the sort of phony moralizing and hand-wringing to be really ridiculous. And I've seen some doozy those fucking comments. Again, I don't think it's surprising that somebody living a very subterranean lifestyle did some really subterranean shit, and that he wasn't rebelling in exactly the right way that people would applaud decades later. And nobody was. And the other thing is also, again, with pulling the song, that gets into some sort of weird political, I don't mean political like politics, but like if that's some other thing then. That's not a creative argument. That's not an artistic argument then. That's about status and position. And I feel like that should be beneath Iggy. Because I feel like if anybody's is assured of that, it's him. If not him, then who the fuck else, So I don't like that, and as somebody who's created a lot of wild stuff, like I always make the analogy, it's sort of like doing porn, like people who have done wild stuff and who have like been out and out. And I feel like you saw this with Lou Reed, like with like other people, like you know what you did, like you put it out there, you know what I mean? And ultimately there's a camera that has like followed like every single angle of you, and it's out there, and the best thing is to just say, yeah, it's out there, I made that. I don't know, you know what you did, and you know why you did it. And I just feel like decades after the fact, I just find that kind of ridiculous. So the song is out there on YouTube, and I'm going to link to it anyway, and you decide for yourselves, damn it. But the song is okay. I think compared to Shoeshine Girl and To Belong, and so in other words, the less rocking songs, and even Out of My Head, I it's maybe equal to Out of My Head. Like, it's okay. It's not a great song, but it's certainly not worth the weird furor that has erupted around it. So you might disagree with me. Again, I believe in free speech and freedom of expression. I believe in these things very, very strongly. And I don't trust anybody, whether it's the PMRC, whether it's Mary Whitehouse, I don't trust anybody who, wants to start, containing that, and I also don't think that enjoying the song or taking that song in, again, like, is, where do you draw the line? Do you not allow solo? Because this is a depiction of aberrant behavior. Depiction is not endorsement. As I've said many times, depiction is not endorsement. He's not saying, hey, look at this awesome thing I did. The whole thing is a tragedy. The whole thing, it's a sad, bad feeling. And it ends the album on this weird, it's a weird ending to the album. Yeah. And again, I mean, there's a lot of that in art. I mean, do you start taking issue with Robert Mapplethorpe stuff? Like, where do you draw the line? And, the end point of that conversation is always a bad one. You might disagree with me. I would ask respectfully that I've said my piece. I would ask respectfully that you keep it to good faith arguments. If you're gonna take issue with what I'm saying, I would honestly ask that you keep it to good faith arguments. In this book, Hans Martins kind of hedges his bets and just basically puts it down to it's a very, very personal decision. What you think about this, and that's kind of it. I think that's probably the smartest way you could put it in a book. But this is my book, man. We're gonna get into the 1995 demos recorded apparently at Eric Schummerhorn's studio. It's a studio apartment. It's both of them on guitars, him and Iggy. The songs that are on the album, we got Innocent World, Out of My Head, I Want to Live, Spellbound, to become Shoeshine Girl, and To Belong. There is, again, more sort of folk-ish, psychedelic sheen. Also the groove on I Want to Live is fantastic. It's more overtly Rolling Stones-ish. It's a lot more Keith Richards-ish. And it is fantastic. It's a different feel than what's on the album, but it's very enjoyable. So the first unreleased song is Goner. And minimal lyric, but really impressive, and I think it's very dark and folkish, for lack of a better way of putting it. I think that it could have been a dark, impressionistic rock and roll song. I think it could have really been fleshed out into something interesting, especially with drums on it, especially with that rhythm section. Definitely could have been on the album. Absolutely would have worked. The next one is I Don't Really Want to Know. And what starts off as kind of taut and bluesy, kind of goes into this weird sing-songy sort of repeat refrain that I find pretty unsatisfying. Definitely not something that should have made the album. It's pretty weak compositionally. It starts off, like I said, sort of interesting as kind of a tight blues, but it doesn't really go anywhere or amount to much of anything. So the next song is Saturday Traffic. Saturday Traffic really could have been turned into a really cool, loose, funky jam. It easily could have taken the place musically of Keep On Believin'. It has a lot of promise, and it's a fully fleshed out song. In terms of the lyrics and checking out the girls, Saturday Traffic is far, far better than Pussy Walk. And really, again, it could have taken the place of Keep On Believin', but really it should have taken the place of Pussy Walk. It's an infinitely better song. And something of a lost gem. I think it really would have worked. And again, it would have fit in with the very New York feel of the album, and given the album more of a sense of time and place. The next song is Untouchable. Untouchable is a very dark ballad. It's the best of the unreleased songs, I'm going to say, and one of the best songs that Iggy wrote in the 90s. I'm not sure how my man Hans Meertens here did not see that. It's phenomenal. It's kind of Nick Cave-esque. But the lyrics are brutally, brutally honest, brutally, brutally in your face. It's self-excoriating, and just brutally honest. It is without pretension. It is without self-pity. And I would love to hear somebody who's like a real belter sing it. I feel like you could arrange it as like an operatic piece. I feel like you could turn it into a piece of rhythm and blues. I feel like Iggy like kind of missed it with not putting this on the album or on Avenue B. It would have fit beautifully on Avenue B. Maybe slightly rearranged the ending a little bit, but if the real gem of these songs is Untouchable, it's a little classic sitting out there, and if you I strongly suggest that you check these demos out because I think they're really interesting, and I think that this is, Saturday Traffic and these are great Iggy Pop songs. The next song is also a strong contender for the best. It's right up there with Untouchable and Saturday Traffic, and that's Blank. Again, kind of prefiguring the Avenue B vibe and whistling along with himself. The lyrics, these lyrics are outstanding. Again, these are great lyrics. These are not indifferent rhymes. These are not tossed off. This is not speed writing. This is perfectly considered phrases and phrasing, lyrical phrases, but then the phrasing of the singing. This totally could have been on Avenue B, or it could have given more depth to Naughty Little Doggie. I could see how you wouldn't want to give it maybe a full band arrangement, but then it totally should have been on Avenue B. This song is fantastic, and some of Iggy's best lyrics. Again, this is one of his best songs of the 90s. I'm saying it, people. So there's some real gems in here if you can hear them beyond being just demos, Keeping with kind of the psychedelic vibe, the sort of folkish, swinging London psychedelic, jangly psychedelic vibe of some of this material. The next song is Words. Again, I think this could have fit on side 2 of Naughty Little Doggie. I think Whitey and Eric could have done great things with the guitars. I think it would have worked. And it's a brighter song of sort of making it through the rain, finding hope. The shimmering of the music matches the shimmering melody, matches the shimmering hopeful sentiments of the lyrics. Again, I don't know why a song like this would have been abandoned. It's such a strong song. It's fantastic. It wouldn't have made sense on Avenue B. This is this should have been prime Naughty Little Doggie material. And then the last song is Stragglers and Strays, which is admittedly much weaker. I think that it's kind of goes for sort of a country blues thing. It's certainly not bad, but the other songs that I am praising, it's not anywhere on that level. And so again, I definitely think you should check these out. I definitely think it's worth it. And it gives glimpses of, maybe it's not Avenue B, maybe it's Avenue A. And it could have been a really, really cool EP, maybe. I don't know. I feel like these should get released. I don't think, because of the, I don't know that there's going to be a reissue of Naughty Little Doggie anytime soon, but I don't think that these demos should just be lost to time. It's kind of like some of the additional material on the Buddha reissues for Soldier and Party that I talked about, where those songs are too good to just be confined to bonus tracks from the early 2000s. I think deserves a better fate than that. So what came next? Critical reception was not particularly great. I remember Details magazine, this was such an odd put down. They said Cesar Romero rocked harder than this. Very a strange line. I've never understood that. Did they not know who Cesar Romero was? Or why Cesar Romero? Like, if you're going to pick an actor, like, what an odd put down. And then the album was very, very quickly forgotten because Train Spotting took off, Lust for Life took off, Iggy was asked, and then soon enough, we're into the Raw Power remix. So Iggy's celebrity, weirdly, for the severity of the flop of the album, Iggy was shot into a different universe. I will say Carol Cooper of Newsday really outdid herself, though, in terms of finding positive things to say about this record. She reviewed Iggy's concert at the Roseland from April 11th of 96, and said, His new music comes from Naughty Little Doggie, his tightest collection of tunes since 1973's Raw Power, only more reflective and overtly funny. This is the touring that the famous Rollins show where he details, where it was in Finland. 28 minutes of that are online, but that is pretty chaotically filmed, and I think the story Rollins tells is better than the extant footage from that. Stick to the Rock Palast show. That's going to get you there. But I will link to some other footage in Iggy on Television. He was a top flight live performer, and this was a great version of the band, again, with Damien, with Pete Marshall on the second guitar, and Whitey very, very capably taking the place of Eric Schermerhorn. I strongly recommend you. I mean, there are far worse ways to... I think the longest show out there is maybe like 65, 68, 70 minutes. There are way worse ways you can spend an hour than watching Iggy fucking tear it up in what was still very, very much his performing prime. As far as towards the end of the year, Iggy did an interview with The Face and said, in terms of, the idiot, like the Berlin period really taking off, and then the embrace of the Stooges. This is a renaissance, most definitely. I wrote a fuckload of music since I made my last record, and it's all acoustic, but it doesn't sound like the fucking Stooges. I got this gig to score a film, and he talks about the Johnny Depp movie. So he already was on his way to Avenue B, which I think is really, really interesting. And so talk about breadcrumbing. And along with that, he was already talking about the process that would lead to records like Preliminaire and Après, and then eventually Free. And I quote, "I seriously plan to put out some albums which aren't rock and roll. That's for motherfucking sure." He was asked a lot about his age at this time because he was pushing 50, and Iggy constantly says, "Old is your vocabulary," or "I have to wear contact lenses," or "I have to wear glasses now, but I don't consider that being old." And prefiguring the move to Miami. At this point, Iggy was contemplating a move to Mexico, and he seemed to indicate that he would only be rocking and rolling for a few more years. But boy, that sure wasn't the case. It's hard to believe that that 1996 could have been the end of anything. But with that, we are at the end of the video. Finally, my God, what an epic. I can't believe that this is the Iggy Pop album that I've spoken the most about. That is totally nuts. I don't even know what to say about that. So, yet here we are. So I hope that you've enjoyed this. Has anybody watched this all the way through? My God. I can't believe I can't believe I took it here, but and yet here we are. So I'll be back soon enough with that about wraps things up here. I'll be back soon enough with another video. We're closing in on 400 subscribers. That's pretty cool. I brazenly told my wife at the beginning of this year, I said, I want to get to 500 this year. And I normally don't think about those sorts of things. As you can tell, my review of Naughty Little Doggie that's longer than The Godfather. But I want to get to 500 subs this year, goddammit. That's my weird sort of goal for no particular reason. So, it's already April, so we're closing in on 400. Pretty exciting. So I thank you all for watching. Has anybody watched this? My God. But I do greatly appreciate it. It has felt really good to do a real Rich Talks Record style video. And believe you me, I've got a whole hell of a lot more planned for the rest of this year. So I'm really excited to jump into those. And yeah, so I'll be back soon enough with another exciting episode. Please like and subscribe and comment and share and do all of the other YouTube things. And like I said, I will see you all soon enough with another exciting video. So until then, everybody, bye!